Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Fumi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney. Today's reviews we're going to be looking at cookies. So this is for WhatsApp and they do have archived versions. This one was last updated this year, so that's a good sign. I'm going to scroll to the bottom because I always look through the consent management process. I want to see if there's a way for me to manage my cookies. Okay, so it seems like this is appropriate for the website. I'm just going to click this button to see how to adjust preferences. I'm interested in the fact that we didn't receive a cookie banner at the bottom here, but I will say that I am accessing the site from the United States. And in the United States, the opportunity to opt out is what is given to residents here. So I talk a lot in my reviews about geography. Each geography has its own data protection law. Now, generally, companies don't put on their website all of the geographies where they process personal data and offer their cookies. So that's definitely a big piece that's always missing consistently from my reviews. However, I still think it's valuable to take a look at the provisions that relate to the cookies and also get insight into the consent management process. Now, I keep saying consent management process, and essentially what that is, cookies constitute personal data, right? Because they can identify individuals. Now, there's different types of cookies. So one of the first things that businesses need to take a look at is what types of cookies are associated with our website or apps. Now, here we can see cookies and other technologies are used to store and receive information, including identifiers. Now, this is key, right? Because we know that the data protection laws define personal data as any information that identifies or is identifiable for an individual. So we know here we've confirmed that cookies do constitute personal data. And you can see all of the instances where they can be collected: computers, mobile phones, and other devices, right? So as an organization, you need to put together all of the cookies and other technologies. Now let's talk a little bit about what this can constitute. This could be a pixel, a beacon. There's other really sophisticated technologies that can follow individuals across websites. So let's say, for example, I'm going to click on Help Center. I'm just going to do this for demonstrative purposes. So I click on Help Center, and that click that I have just done on this page, now I haven't read the full cookie notice yet, but there's a lot of sophistication in how organizations can see and have insight into consumers and what types of buttons they're clicking on the site, right? Because that type of information gives them more insight into how consumers navigate the sites, and it helps them to market better and create ads, etc. It helps the business to function better, right? If you know that most of your consumers are clicking on safety and security, then you're going to put a lot of efforts and energy into making sure that this page is good, right? For example. So let's go back. What does this policy cover? This policy explains how we use cookies and the choices you have when you use our web-based services. Now, this is really important. I talk a lot about scope. Let me tell you something about data protection, right? When we think about personal data, we think about the different groups of data subjects associated with how we process information, right? In some capacity, we have customers, right, as a business. In some capacity, we have employees. In another capacity, we have vendors and partners. All of those groups of individuals are still individuals with their own personal data. And we have to create notices that address each type of processing activity with each group, right? So adding here that this is exclusive to the web-based services, our website or our optional features, qualifying who is in scope for this policy is very important. And I talk a lot about this on my channel. It's very important to have a section on every single notice related to personal data about who's in scope. Now, I'm accessing the site, so this policy applies to me, right? Let's say, for instance, I was on the mobile phone. I would need to identify whether or not this policy covers me, and if it does not cover me, review the cookie notice associated with cookies associated with the phone and or other devices, because this one says it's being used for web-based services, our website, or our optional features, right? So this is who is in scope for this policy, right? If it's not listed here, then it's not in scope. Let's say, for example, you're a vendor and you are providing some type of service. If you are not using the website for the web-based services, then you already know that this is not applicable to you, right? How we use cookies. We use the cookies to understand, secure, operate, and personalize and provide our services. Now, the one thing I'm very surprised about is, as I navigate this site, I didn't have the opportunity to decide whether or not analytic cookies are being captured about me, advertising cookies, and this is very important because especially in the United States, There's a very specific manner in which advertising can be conducted by organizations, and I haven't been given the opportunity to exercise my rights as it pertains to these types of cookies. Now, let's scroll down to how to control the cookies. You can follow the instructions provided on your browser or device, okay? Usually located under settings or preferences to modify your cookie settings. Your browser or device may offer settings that allow you to choose whether browser cookies are set and delete them. So the offering by WhatsApp is associated with going onto your browser or device, but something that some organization, okay, I've just found the information I wanted to see. So let's talk. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. If you have questions about cookies specifically, take a look at my description. What I want to say here is I think this sentence is incredibly important, right? This website that I'm on, right, whatsapp.com, exclusively uses first-party cookies. Now, that is a very important piece of information. And in my own opinion, I believe that this sentence should appear at the top, right? Because I've just gone into an immense amount of detail about how there was no cookie banner associated with this site and how we didn't have the opportunity to exercise our preferences related to analytics and advertising. But per this web page, we're told that only first-party cookies are used on the website exclusively, right? Which is what I'm accessing. Now, this is very important. For anybody that's not familiar with what first-party cookies are, they essentially allow the website to function, and generally organizations don't give consumers of the website the opportunity to opt out of these, because without these first-party cookies, we would not be able to access this web page. The ones that are optional that are discussed here are the analytics, security, and advertising, right? But these are not utilized on this site per this sentence. And that is why the option hasn't been provided for me to opt out of anything. Because as far as I'm concerned, there are no advertising cookies as I interact with the site. Now, that's really important. And actually, this is the first review that I've done that this sentence exists. Most websites are using a lot of sophistication, which I had mentioned when I clicked this Help Center button. Many companies have different types of pixels or beacons or tracking technologies that allow an organization to understand what types of clicks consumers are doing. But that is not the case here because the website only uses first-party cookies. Now, the other thing I want to mention here is that this particular sentence says cookies, they give a definition of what constitutes cookies. I'm very interested in what the cookies looks like related to the mobile phones and other devices, because my presumption is that we will have the opportunity to exercise our consent preferences when it comes to these. But as far as we're concerned for this particular review, because I'm reviewing the website only, it's first-party cookies and I don't have the opportunity to opt out because of how first-party cookies work. So I guess the learning lesson here is the fact that it's really important to draft a cookie notice that reflects what your organization is doing, which is why we go through an immense amount of detail on this YouTube channel, looking at different cookie notices. And I guess the takeaway that I have for businesses is you need to understand what your organization is doing. What your organization is doing may be different to what this organization is doing, right? Because they've explicitly detailed the fact that this website only uses first-party cookies. Now, that may not be the case for your organization, and you need to be able to determine, what are our obligations under the law when it comes to cookies? Understanding what a first-party cookie is probably very foundational. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. I've really enjoyed looking at this cookie notice today, and I do use WhatsApp. So not only am I a consumer of the website, but I'm also a consumer of how cookies are utilized on the mobile phone because I do have the WhatsApp app. So I think it might be valuable at some point in the future to start looking at notices associated with applications. Almost every single review I've done on my channel has been on website privacy related documents. But I think it might be valuable to look at, what types of notices are being presented on mobile phones, because essentially this cookie notice may not be applicable because they've explicitly said that this applies to the first-party cookies on the site, right? But we can tell here that cookies are also associated with mobile phones. So I guess my question would be, what does the cookie notice look like when we log into WhatsApp? So I probably will do something like that in the future, and we can start taking a look at app privacy notices, right? Because they're going to be different in how they interact or process personal data as opposed to websites, right? So I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you have any comments about what I've stated, leave them below and I will see you in another review.